The first half of the 19th century brought dramatic changes in transportation and communications to the U.S. These changes increased the demand for newspapers and increased their production. In 1800, 200 newspapers were being published in the United States. By 1860, there were 3,000. Many of the new papers founded in the 1830s and 40s reached unprecedented circulation numbers. The total annual circulation of all newspapers between 1828 and 1840 doubled from 68 million to 148 million copies. The newspapers consisted of many things. One of the most important topics was slavery and abolition, and one of the greatest abolitionist writers was Elijah Lovejoy. This is the story of how Elijah Lovejoy became a turning point in history and influenced the abolitionists of the world to work together, deeply affecting many individuals who opposed slavery and helping bring about the end of slavery. Elijah's parents were Elizabeth and Daniel Lovejoy. Elijah's siblings were Daniel, Joseph Cammett, Sybil Patty, Owen, Elizabeth Gordon Patty, and John Ellingwood Lovejoy. Elijah's father was a congregational preacher and farmer, and his mother was a homemaker and devout Christian. Elijah was taught to read the Bible and other religious texts by his mother at an early age. Elijah attended private schools and enrolled at Colby College as a sophomore in 1823 when he was proficient in Latin and mathematics. In September 1826, Lovejoy graduated and was class valedictorian. In 1827, Lovejoy arrived in St. Louis, Missouri, a major port in a slave state that shared its longest border with the free state of Illinois. To earn some money, Lovejoy worked with a man named T.J. Miller who worked for the St. Louis Times. The paper focused mostly on religion and a little on slavery. They believed that it was a good idea to send freed black Americans to Africa, but they didn't focus on this because it was a dangerous topic to discuss in a slave state. Later in 1833, a group of Protestants in St. Louis offered to finance a religious newspaper if Lovejoy would agree to return and edit it. Lovejoy accepted, and on November 22, 1833, he published the first issue of the St. Louis Observer. His editorials criticized both the Catholic Church and slavery. In 1834, the St. Louis Observer began to increase his coverage of slavery, the most controversial issue of the day. Even as Lovejoy expressed his anti-slavery views, he claimed to be an emancipationist rather than an abolitionist. In the spring of 1835, the Missouri Republican advocated the gradual emancipation of slaves in Missouri, and Lovejoy voiced his support through the Observer. Lovejoy urged anti-slavery groups in Missouri to push for the issue to be addressed during a proposed state constitutional convention. Over time, Lovejoy became bolder and more outspoken about his anti-slavery views, advocating the outright emancipation of all slaves. Lovejoy's views on slavery began to incite complaints and threats. Pro-slavery proponents condemned anti-slavery coverage which appeared in newspapers, stating that it was against the vital interests of the slaveholding states. Because of all this controversy, the St. Louis Observer was taking a hit. They were also receiving threats, so they sent Lovejoy a letter asking him to cool down the tones of his articles. He refused. Because of this, Lovejoy was fired from the Observer and asked to leave. Lovejoy and the Observer continued to be embroiled in controversy. In April 1836, Francis McIntosh, a free man of color and boatman, was arrested by two policemen. While being sent to jail, McIntosh grabbed a knife and stabbed both men. One was killed and the other was seriously injured. McIntosh attempted to escape, but was caught by a white mob who tied him to a tree and burned him to death. Some of the mob were brought before a grand jury to face charges. The presiding judge, Luke Lawless, refused to convict anyone. He said the crime was a spontaneous mob action without any specific people to prosecute. On April 30th, 2022, the city of St. Louis commemorated the lynching of Francis McIntosh with a public soil collection ceremony in Keener Plaza near the site. In the face of all the negative publicity and two break-ins in May 1836, Lovejoy decided to move the Observer across the Mississippi River to Alton, Illinois. On July 21st, 1836, Lovejoy published a scathing editorial criticizing the way that Judge Luke Lawless had handled the murder trial of Francis McIntosh. He argued that the judge's actions appeared to accept the murder. Lovejoy also announced that his next issue would be printed in Alton. Before he could move the press, an angry mob broke into the Observer's office and vandalized the press. Lovejoy then gained a new printing press and had it sit on a riverbank unguarded. Overnight, vandals destroyed it and threw the remains into the Mississippi River. Lovejoy served as a minister at Upper Alton Presbyterian Church, now College Avenue Presbyterian Church. In 1837, he started the Alton Observer as an abolitionist Presbyterian paper. Lovejoy's views on slavery became more extreme, and he called for a convention to discuss forming an Illinois state chapter of the American Anti-Slavery Society, which was established in Philadelphia in 1833. Alton residents grew worried. They did not think it was such a good idea to harbor such an extreme abolitionist. Lovejoy held the Illinois Anti-Slavery Congress at the Presbyterian Church in Upper Alton on October 26, 1837. Lovejoy had acquired a fourth press and hid it in a warehouse. Then a pro-slavery mob attacked the building on the evening of November 7, 1837. Pro-slavery mobs approached Gilman's warehouse, where Lovejoy had hidden his printing press. The conflict continued. According to the Alton Observer, the mob fired shots into the warehouse. They also used ladders to get to the roof where they lit it on fire. When Lovejoy and his men returned fire, they hit several people in the crowd. After the attacking party had apparently withdrawn, Lovejoy opened the door and was instantly struck by 5 bullets, dying in a few minutes. Elijah Lovejoy was buried in an Alton cemetery. His grave was left unmarked to prevent vandalism. The ceremony was also kept small. After Lovejoy was killed, there was a dramatic increase in the number of people in the North and West who joined anti-slavery societies. The number of abolitionists grew dramatically, which helped form the Illinois Anti-Slavery Congress. In his name, his brother Owen Lovejoy became the leader of the Illinois Abolitionists and a member of Congress. Owen played a leading role in passing legislation in Congress to end slavery in the District of Columbia and prohibit slavery in the territories, which Abraham Lincoln signed into law. Abraham Lincoln referred to Lovejoy's murder in his Lyceum address in January 1838. About Lovejoy, Lincoln said, "Whenever this effect shall be produced among us, whenever the vicious portion of population shall be permitted to throw printing presses into rivers, shoot editors, and hang and burn obnoxious persons at pleasure and with immunity, depend on it, this government cannot last." At a church meeting, the Sunday after Lovejoy's murder, a man named John Brown, influenced by the bravery and boldness of Elijah Lovejoy, vowed to commit his life to abolition. He stated, "Here before God, in the presence of all these witnesses, from this time I consecrate my life to the destruction of slavery." When John Brown seized the largest federal arsenal at Harper's Ferry, Virginia, in October of 1859, he forced the citizens of the United States to reconsider the immortality of the institution of slavery and the injustices enforced by the government. The raid on Harper's Ferry and the resulting execution of John Brown were major turning points in the American abolitionist movement. John Glanville Gill was an American minister, scholar in history, and civil rights activist. While working on research for his dissertation about Elijah Parrish Lovejoy, an editor and abolitionist, he lived and worked in Alton, Illinois, in the mid-1940s. Inspired by the works and actions of Elijah Lovejoy, he worked with other ministers to try to integrate public schools, raise awareness about racial discrimination, and end segregation practices. The Elijah Parrish Lovejoy Award was established by Colby College in his honor. It is awarded annually to a member of the press who has contributed to the nation's journalistic achievement. Many years after Lovejoy was killed, Alton made a monument for him. The monument consists of a 93-foot-tall main shaft topped by a 17-foot-tall winged statue of Victory. Located on a bluff, the complete work stands more than 300 feet above the Mississippi River below. It has 2 side spires mounted by eagles as well as 2 bronze lion chalice statues. With all of the new advances in technology in the world, the people were advancing too. With new inventions, there were new opinions. If Elijah Lovejoy hadn't shared his opinion on slavery, the growth of it could have exceeded anything we could have ever imagined.